Michael Hicks. I know you see this handsome gentleman behind me or next to me, and I'm going to get to him. But first, I've got some words from my sponsor. For those of you that are new to this podcast, we explore mindset shifts and soul work behind truly thriving in life. I'm your host, Michael Hicks, with the most founder of Live to Thrive and former professional basketball coach turned life coach and relationship strategist. Today, I'm honored to bring my guest on. However, I'm not going to introduce him quite yet because, as always, I got to give you words from our sponsors. Can't sleep? Got the aches and pains? We got to check out this CBD oil. I swear by it. It's Amish tested, y'all. If you cannot sleep or you got the aches and pain, this CBD oil will truly transform your life. I've got so many statistics that I can share with you. Without quality sleep, you cannot be fully effective. You're pouring from an empty cup. You cannot be a good employee. You can't be a good person. Can't be a good father, mother, etc. So only for Framing New Heights listeners, you can get 50% off at checkout by simply going to superfungummies.com. And at that checkout, you put in New Heights, that's all cap locks, and you get 50% off. Great deal. Highly suggest it. It works. Love the product. Been using it now for about 3-4 years. It's been awesome. That's what I tell you. Highly suggested. So if you're struggling with pain, anxiety, anything that tough, and you're just difficulty sleeping, that's the product you got to have. And as always, I got to give a shout out to my own coaching agency called Live to Thrive. What I do is I help you empower to become your best self. In fact, if you are listening to this, it's probably too late for you to get in my mastermind class. I just launched a new mastermind class, $99, got you rebooted for 90 days. Complete body transformation, mindset transformation, career set transformation, you name it, I've been there. You can check out my testimonials at www.livetothrive.com. But if you're truly struggling with maybe your mindset, your growth, you just feel stuck in where you're at in life, you want to make that change, I'm going to tell you, coaches have coaches, and we're probably going to talk today about that on the podcast today. So invest in your best self and start that today. We're halfway through the new year. Where are you at? How are those New Year's resolutions going? If you got questions or concerns on all that, check out www.livetothrive.com, or my Instagram page is probably my highest one. It's coach_HicksMB, and that's where you can get me. And enough with that. Without further ado, I am honored today with this wonderful gentleman. His name is Kris D. Roberts. He is with us today on the pod, and he is an actor. He is a singer. He is a dancer, and he's a show captain whose journey is a testament of vulnerability, which is a product of my Live to Thrive formula. He's got passion and authenticity. Kris has been captivating audiences on Broadway and on national tours, which I'm super excited to talk about today. He brings in emotional truth through performance, and it's just a beautiful to have you here, Kris. Kris, welcome to the show. How you feeling, brother?
Doing good, Michael. Thanks for having me. I think you might have me mixed up for the Broadway Kris D. Roberts.
I might. Forgive me on that because I was doing some research
that's okay.
on that. Correct the audience. Correct me and tell the audience what the true facts are then.
You nailed it down pretty well. I'm Kris D. Roberts, aspiring actor of 5 years now, full-time employee, just looking to continue breaking into the film industry. I've never been on Broadway yet. I'm always game for whatever, though. But that, I'll let you get back to the intro, what you'd like to.
No, I just wanted to I want you to share your story, Kris, on how you came into performance. And then I've got a second question to that. And the second question is, and how that shaped your relationship to vulnerability and personal courage.
Yeah. Well, my first go round in the film industry was 2019. I got a background role on a film called Sweet Girl on Netflix. Netflix plug, great film. Check it out if you haven't seen it, Sweet Girl. So I went to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania from Franklin, Pennsylvania, where I live, my native state, my native hometown. And I went down for the weekend. I got an Airbnb and I spent, about 28 hours and 2 days on a film set. Fell in love with it, Michael. I was like, this is what I'd like to do the rest of my days. I'm 48 years old. Well, obviously I was 43 then, but I made the decision, I would like to pursue this So I went back to my full-time job, great job, Allegheny Toyota. I'm an auto detailer. I recondition, trade into vehicles. I'm a detailer. No glitz, no glam. I just make cars beautiful again. Uh, so anyway, I sat around for about a year, and COVID set in. And at that point, I took a layoff. Pennsylvania was one of the states that was basically shut down. I took the layoff. I went back to work and I decided, you know what, maybe I should go back because I grew up between Pennsylvania and Florida as a kid. So I was like, maybe I should go back to South Florida and pursue some film opportunities. So I went ahead and lined out a job. I packed everything I owned in the back of my 2002 Honda Accord, which had already made 3 Florida to Pennsylvania Christmas vacation trips. So I was like, you know what? We're going to do it again. So you want to talk about courage?
That's huge. Yes, yes. I want to
Launch,
kind
launch.
of go ahead, go, Kris. I just want to kind of hone in on that. How? So you're at this age. COVID sets in. You're like, I need a life change, and you're like, I really like this. We and at our age, Kris, we're comparable in age. I'm 52. You're 48,
Yes,
and
sir.
it's like how to explain to our audience what that really took. Like, how scary was it? Kind of explain that whole process if you could.
Well, it started obviously with me just speaking on it, Michael. Me gearing my mindset towards, I'm going to give this a shot. At the time, like I said, I was 43 years old. Uh, I've done a lot of things in life. I've always been a detailer. I've always been able to pay the bills. I'm not wealthy or famous by far. However, I'm a blue collar worker. So, you know, making that decision that at 43 years old, I took a job as a detail supervisor at an RV dealership, which was completely nothing like I'm used to. And auto detailing, it's apples to oranges kind of, because you're almost housekeeping slash house washing with these things.
Okay.
So it wasn't really up my alley. But anyway, back to the courage. You know, my backstory growing up between Florida, Pennsylvania. I'd go to school in Pennsylvania until I was 13, and then I moved to Florida full time, only going to Florida during the summers, you see, up until I was 13. So my life has been earmarked by having no choice but to be courageous. Um, I, I left a small town in Northwest Pennsylvania at 13 years old and was transplanted into a very diverse, different environment than I was used to. So right away I knew, but mind you, in my small town, my older brother was a force to be reckoned with, so I always had an older brother in my life. But here I show up in Southwest Florida, exposed to all kinds of nonsense, violence, drugs, just a ghetto, if you will. Granted, we were middle class. We didn't live in the ghetto, but we were right on the outskirts of the ghetto. And wouldn't you know, lo and behold, it wasn't long and I started getting pushed around. And I don't care who you are, where you're from, how wholesome your upbringing was. The more that happens, everybody comes to a breaking point. And it didn't take me long because I kept to myself, minded my own business. So, it was all new to me there. And once that started, it's like I experienced some real hate from these people. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I was always being pushed around, being bullied. So saying that, Michael, to say I took some courage, whether it was the right, wrong, or indifferent thing to do, and I found myself in a street gang.
Wow.
At 15 years old, I'm enlisted well, I didn't jump right in at 15. I ran around with him for a while, but before long, I became enlisted in one of the most violent Hispanic street gangs in the country
Wow.
at 16.
Yeah.
So I says, "Hey, Ma, I joined a gang."
Right.
And I was a handful. I was getting into drugs. I was getting into nonsense, all because I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how to cope with what I was experiencing at that point in my life. So the drugs, the alcohol, the party scene, running around with these real tough guys, if you will. They were from Chicago. They were legitimate. These guys would kill you.
Wow.
And here I
Kris,
am in the midst. I says, "Hey, Ma," because I was always that type to I'll show them or I'll show you or whoever. I says, "I joined a gang," and I seen the disappointment in my mom's face, and I'm like, ugh. So I was like, she says, "Well, go live with them." So that's what I did, Michael. You still there? Looks like we lost you.
oh, there we go. There we go.
There you go. You're
Yeah,
back.
it froze. It froze for some reason. Ironic. Um, how long did this go on, Kris?
Until I left Fort Myers, Florida at 18 years old, hitchhiking to start my life over in North Central Louisiana.
Can I ask you what was the final thread? Because when you are involved in such of the gang, so to speak, I know this. Well, I know this from a perspective of because I worked with professionals that are lawyers, attorneys, and they say, you know, as soon as you buy into their gang, you are bought and paid for the rest of your life. So how did you escape that, Kris? Can you kind of explain that to the audience?
It was divine providence, probably. I'm white. I'm clearly not Latino, you know. So when I told my mom I joined a gang, the next thing I was told, which was the best thing that could have happened, probably, I was told to get out of the house. So here I am, moved in with these guys full time now. So this is after about a year and a half in their acquaintance, about a half a year in acquaintance, a year in membership. Now all of a sudden I'm moving my stuff in to the gang headquarters in my area. So what happened was the federal people came looking for one of the members for their sins up north. I guess they left Chicago to get away and caught up to them. And here I sat right in the middle of all of it.
And was
You
that your
know,
like aha moment to be like, dude, this is not me? Like, what
no,
was
I'll
it?
tell you, the aha moment, Michael, was when my phone rang. I think I had a flip phone.
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
just started.
we all had those. Yeah, yeah.
Everybody just started getting these flip phones, So here I am. I got the flip phone. It rings. I answered it, and I was told that they were coming to take my life.
At what age were you when this happened?
I was 17 at this
How
point.
how scared were you at that moment?
I was very afraid, and it wasn't like I said. I knew the sources. I mean, the day these guys showed up from Chicago, Michael, I stuck my head in this Cadillac, and there's 7 of them, numerous face tattoo. I mean, these guys were real deal Holyfield. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, was saved my life before we get too far out there, because they did. They came to serve a death warrant, whatever you call it. They wanted to kill me. I basically had a contract on my life, not once but twice before I even turned 18 years old. And by this time, I'm homeless, Michael. I'm running the streets with pimps all hours of the night. you know. And then I got to the point where I'd stand in line at a homeless shelter because I got tired of running with the pimps all night. School was a thing of the past. I dropped out of school in 9th grade, Michael. So before the what they did is they sent people down from Chicago to scout the area.
Okay.
Before they sent in the people that needed to be there. These guys would sometimes, they wouldn't have food, they wouldn't have a place to stay, and I was always that person that would look out for them. I'd give them a sandwich, give them a few bucks, smoke some grass with them out of, whatever. I'd look out for them. And one of them he was like OG status in Chicago. He had a lot of pull, okay? And in fact, he was the reason I even got in, because when the big guys showed up, he basically vouched for me. I was a made guy. So here I am. This guy saved my life, Michael. The guy that I looked out for before the big guys showed up, he stopped them from killing me. He cleared my name. There were members talking to the federal agents about each other, telling on each other. And again, let's not kid ourselves. I'm the only white member. Okay.
Did you have a nickname?
Yes, sir.
Can you share that, or are you okay to share that?
It was Little Digo.
Okay. Okay.
Because I was explosive.
Okay.
Yeah. I was explosive. I had a temper. In hindsight, Michael, it was fear. It was everything, all of that stuff balled up, from a troubled childhood into addiction at an early age. I wasn't a tough guy. I wasn't a gangster, man. I wasn't a criminal. I was somebody that was starving for acceptance. I was somebody that was hungry, man, for something that, when I stood in line at them homeless shelters, brother, there were kids that were getting ready to go to school. And this, it was all my own choice. But mind you, I had by the time I was 17, 18 and all this started to go down, I had packed in a lot of baggage that I didn't realize at 18 years old when I left to start my life over, free and clear, mind you. I was blessed out of this gang. Finally, I got my quote unquote walking papers, Michael. They let me leave.
How does that happen? How does that even happen?
Like I said in the beginning, probably divine providence. I loved my neighbor, Mike. I loved my neighbor. I looked out for people when they were down on their luck. And that's what saved my life. This guy had enough power to override everything that was going on. So yeah, I got real lucky.
I wouldn't say lucky, and I use this a lot with my framework with my clients, is blessed. Luck is for people that are not blessed. You have been blessed, brother. You have a testimonial story that is vibrant, beautiful, and we haven't even scratched the surface. I want to ask you this question. Did you have a dad growing up, or no? You did. Let me ask you, because you said, you alluded earlier about the acceptance piece. As you look back and reflect, what was missing from mom and dad that had you go out and search for that acceptance piece?
Well, alcoholism's been a part of the family. Domestic violence has been a part of the family. So, and also, Michael, I didn't mention, but when I was 3 years old, I was hit by a car. I was hit by a Lincoln Continental doing like 45 miles an hour. My father all but gave up hope in me even surviving. He set me down, Michael, and he said a prayer, and I came back to life. I guess I was turning blue. I was drowning in my own blood. Massive head trauma. Lost all my teeth, and see, that was part of me getting picked on when I was a kid, bro. I was a little fat country kid with an eye patch and false teeth.
Wow.
Yeah, I know how cruel people can be, brother.
Oh, kids can be extremely cruel. My daughter was in third grade, and that was a big tough year for her. She's going to be in fifth this past year, but that was a year that she immensely struggled. So I know, and I was in the education system for many years. Kids can be brutal, and
Yes,
I got
sir.
to just say, Chris, your story is such a divine. I like you used the word divine. It's such a divine testimony of how you basically went from the depths of hell. And we even touched on some of the great things that you've done, which I want to talk about. But I want to transition a little bit here. Is I talk a lot about this on my Live to Thrive with my Live to Thrive clients, but 85% of people report feeling pressure to perform, right? And in life rather than live from purpose. And purpose is a big component of what I do and I teach my clients. How has embracing vulnerability, now we're moving a little fast here, and if I'm going too fast in your storyline, it's okay, just stop me. But the question that I have is how has embracing vulnerability on stage or in your acting role translated into authenticity in your daily life?
Well, it's you have to be extremely vulnerable to take on a character. You know what I mean? I love reading the script, and I know I'll get to the second part of the question, but speaking on that vulnerability that comes along with it, taking on a role, you know, you basically just lay that character over top of. I studied Meisner. I study Meisner technique,
Can you
and
tell the audience what that is?
the Meisner acting technique is a technique that a lot of it. Well, there's a lot of good acting techniques, but I prefer the acting technique that allows me to take experience and apply experience. But before I even apply my experiences to my character, I learn my character. I learn everything about the scene. I learn everything about every character in the scene. So I'm able to take that character and just lay him over my life experiences, you see, and I'll use my life experiences to bring that character to life. I think it's an extremely powerful thing because it allows that energy to come out creatively, if that makes sense.
You know what? So it does. It makes a lot of sense. And gosh, like let's get into your acting because I want to. Your story is awesome and it's cool to see. What's been some of your big roles? Can you kind of talk to the audience about that? What are you currently doing right now? And I got more deeper questions, but I
Sure.
kind of went off script because your story is so intriguing, and I know my audience is going to really enjoy hearing this because to all my listeners out there, this is a exact reason. If you don't have a faith based lifeline opportunity to get out of things, you need to get with someone who does or as an alignment like of a coach to help you get out of this. And Chris, your story is really truly a blessing. So going back to what I originally wanted to ask you, talk to us a little bit about your roles. What's your current role? What are you working on right now? What's your biggest roles? Give us some of that stuff. Go.
All right, Mike. There's been I've done a lot of background work. Obviously, if you speak to anybody in the industry, that's basically where you start. Since 2019, starting with one film credit, since 2019, I've acquired 38 additional. That's film, television, commercial, music video. A large majority of those were small independent projects where I was background, or I may have had a scene where I did a fight and had very little dialogue. So there's been no major roles up to this point, to be honest. Lots of supporting roles, and again, lots of background work. You know, I did a lot of background work for credits. Everybody that's in the industry will understand sometimes a low budget, no budget project will They'll give you a gas stipend, they'll feed you, and they'll give you the IMDb credit, which is essential for an actor to build their acting resume. So there's never free work, if you will. Just saying all that to say, I've got a conglomeration of those things. I've had the supporting roles, I've had the smaller roles where I've been able to work on my chops, see myself on camera, see myself on screen. So where I'm at this point in my life, when I moved to Florida in 2020, Michael, I started in Fort Myers. I amassed a handful of credits. I moved further north to Tampa. Thank God for the Florida film industry, because they kept feeding me these roles, Michael, and I kept moving further north to get closer to these opportunities. So now, from Fort Myers, I was traveling to Tampa. I traveled to St. Augustine. I traveled all over Florida for film roles, but majority of them were Tampa and north.
Gotcha.
Somewhere in Miami. I did a lot of work in Miami too. But anyway, I moved from Fort Myers. After about a year and a half, I moved to Tampa. From Tampa, I began to catch roles all across the state, occasionally going back to Miami for red carpet premieres or various things that can go on in Miami. I could still get to Miami. And when I left Tampa, and all of this was orchestrated by Annette Bautista Day, who is my film mentor. She's held the camera for artists such as T.I. She's done a lot of great work in the industry, and she's been my mentor. So from Tampa, I started saying to myself, you know what? I'm going to aim for Atlanta, because Atlanta is like the second Hollywood right now for film production.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's coming to the Northeast too. There's a lot of work in the Northeast, I got to admit. But anyway, while I was in Tampa, Michael, I'm telling myself, if I move further north, I'm gonna aim for Atlanta. So when I moved to Gainesville, Florida, I hooked up with a gentleman, Andrew Delozier at Saltgrass Studios. Love you, brother. And I began to operate from Gainesville, Florida. I'd be doing film roles. I had Orlando close by. I could still get back to Tampa. I could still get to Miami, but I was working now at this point. The whole while I'm carrying my full-time job, and most of the jobs were 1099 contract labor. So, I'm out there. The only thing that's keeping me afloat, Mike, is the sweat of my brow. I had no guarantees, man, but I kept plugging away. I kept plugging away. Yeah. Next thing you know, the phone rings. I'm on my way home from work. Sean Thompson, you know how this story ends. I'm on my way home from work. It's 5:30 p.m. The phone rings. I almost die in this intersection. I look down. It's Atlanta, Georgia. From my friend Sean Thompson's referral, I submitted for Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
And they said, come to Atlanta. We want to use you as a feature background extra.
Wow.
As a character. Okay. So here I show up in Atlanta, and I'm putting on a gi. I'm representing Team France at the Saikai Taikai.
Wow.
But saying that to say, what started in Fort Myers with me just going, one day at a time, Michael, making connections, volunteering to work on films with friends to help them get them up. Next thing you know, I'm on red carpets. Next thing you know, I'm on the karate mat with actors I've admired since childhood.
Name them. Who are they?
Okay, the first big role I had, it was my first fight scene, was with Damian Chapa. 1993, I believe, Blood In, Blood Out. And it was very significant to me, Michael, because it was my first interaction with a Hollywood actor. He's got Blood In, Blood Out, Street Fighter he was in.
Oh, okay.
Under Siege 2. But the significance that Blood In, Blood Out had to my upbringing, because I was in a Hispanic gang. Blood In, Blood Out is a Hispanic, a Spanish prison gang movie.
Wow.
So the irony that something I admired when I was in that lifestyle, that my first significant role was going to be opposite of somebody I watched when I was like 14, man. You know,
Yeah.
and that was 3 years prior to being on Cobra Kai. So I kept hammering away even after that. And you know, I've been on a film set with Jeremy Meeks. You guys, the guy that broke the internet years back, the Hot Felon, I guess they called him. They took him right out of he came right out of jail and went into modeling contracts and acting work. And, you know, I remember working with Jeremy Meeks on a film, and I pulled him aside. I was like, hey, man, you got any advice for a
Yeah.
new actor?
Yeah.
And he gave me a spiel, you know, told me to just keep doing it, keep working at it, keep working at it. In the next 18 months, Michael, I was on a total of 3 film sets with Jeremy Meeks. After that first time of me asking him his advice, I landed on a film set with him 2 more times in the next 18 months. And each time I was able to say, hey, thanks for your advice. Thank you for being kind to me. Because, you know, a lot of times they'll just move us background people aside. You're really insignificant sometimes, or at least a lot of us can feel that way. But anyhow,
Yeah.
you know, he was kind enough to take time and tell me, you know, so each time I'd return to the set and I'd see him, I'd run over and say, hey, bro, thanks for the advice. Look, it's working, you know, and we'd have a moment. Fast forward 6 months, I see him on another film. Fast forward 6 months, we're walking a red carpet on South Beach, Miami on a rooftop cinema, bro. You
Hey, I
know,
want the
so,
invite the next time you're on a red carpet because I want to experience that. I mean, how does that feel? Like, tell the audience, what's that feel like?
well, you know, I felt like an imposter.
Hey,
I had to
I
touch,
just talked about imposter syndrome on another podcast with another guest. But go on, yeah, go ahead.
you know, there's that, what am I doing here? You know, of course I know why I was there. You know, I worked to get there. So that went out the window. So after the whole, like, I don't deserve to be here feeling, or, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
who am I? It was amazing, man. You know, I've had the privilege. I've been on music videos with Jay Wheeler. He's an international reggaeton artist, very very well known. You know, and my face is on his video. I've met some pretty significant people in the film industry, man, and it's all because I get up in the morning, man. I make my mind up that I'm going to go and give 100% whatever I'm doing today. You
That
know,
that
and
brings that brings me into, I love that you brought that because this is a good segue into that piece because I call it like mindset, growth, and performance. And you know, I want to transition from audition callbacks to shows, but the mindset sport, the mindset itself, and you just alluded to it. It's such a vital component. And I teach this, and I've worked with professional athletes about this. I know, and that's why I want to kind of pick your brain about it. How do you handle pressure, stress, and all while maintaining that mental resiliency? How do you do that?
well, you know, as men, we're classic bottle up. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So saying that, I don't talk to people a lot. I'm on social media a lot, but what works for me, I like to journal. I like to exercise. I like to eat healthy ish. You know, these are all they this ain't something that happens all at once. This is an ongoing thing, you know. It's failing, it's getting back up. You know, the the whole principle of rejection as an actor. You know, I've received way more rejections than I've gotten roles. So, you know, you learn to really let things slide off your back.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's tough. it's really tough, Michael, because my upbringing required me to stay in fight or flight around the clock.
Yeah.
There was no break.
Wow.
So now I have to hit the brakes. I have to sit down. I have to sit down and be aware of myself. You know, and I have to do what, like the journaling, the recreational stuff. You know, I don't mingle a lot. I don't have a huge circle. So there's people that I reach out to. A lot of this is my faith. You know, I didn't get to mention earlier, part of my stint in my teens, early 20s, was I spent time at Teen Challenge International. It's a rehab that was formed. There's a storied cross in the Switchblade.
Okay, keep going. Tell us more about that.
That taught me that, you know, God loves me, bro.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
You know what I mean? And it's like, because I didn't love me.
Right.
I didn't love me. I didn't know how to. Well, that's probably the problem. I loved me too much. You know.
No, I don't think you knew. I don't think that was what it was. I don't think you knew what love was. I don't think you knew at that time your self-worth and what you're truly worthy of. And going back to God loves you, not only does he love you, but you're like a child of him. He can, if 99, let's take the example of a shepherd and their sheep. If 99 are there, but one goes missing, he's going to find you. Jesus is like that shepherd. Yeah. Yeah, and he found you, brother. He found you. You know, hey, I like what you talked about, because you talked about daily rituals, and this is a big piece of my programming as well at Live to Thrive. Is research shows that high performers with daily rituals are 20% more likely to maintain, and I hate this word I'm about to say, but they're more likely to maintain long-term motivation. Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. You got to have a plan, first of all. You know, if I don't have a plan, I'm planning to fail. How's that go? You know what I mean? So first of all, I do believe in having a plan, a routine, a schedule. And I was gratefully, I was taught that from a young age. My father being in the military, he was in the Navy, you know, so that was a big part of the upbringing, man. I used to get up at 3:30 in the morning and go run and check trap lines with my dad, come back and go to elementary school. I was tough, bro. I was a tough kid.
How old were you at this age?
8 or 9, maybe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we didn't play.
That's insane. That's insane. Hey, you know, you spent a lot of time working collaboratively with fellow cast, crew family. What have you learned about emotional safety and connection?
I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring that one out, you know. I've been socially awkward all my life.
Okay.
So I suit up and show up and do what I'm asked to do. You know, I look at time on set as it's a business, Michael. You know, and I have to show up and represent my brand, my character, my role.
Yeah.
Because there's an expectation, you know.
For sure.
And it's funny that came up because we're on set of Cobra Kai, you know, and some of my teammates were kind of being a little ridiculous, you know. And here's the thing, Michael, if I'm on a Netflix set, well, if they're behind the camera and they pick up some ridiculousness, guess where it's not going to be?
It's not going to be on the camera. It's not going to be in the film.
It's not going to be in the. It's not going to be in the show.
Mm-hmm.
So as this went on, I started to get a little ornery about it. I was like, "Listen, guys, let's get it together."
For
you
sure.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
When's the last time you were on a Netflix set?
For
you
sure.
know?
For
And
sure.
it's like you can't bring that energy and think, so saying that to say I just show up, I'm polite, I'm professional. I worked with actors that I admired in my childhood, bro, and it was like a dream the whole time I was there. I'll never forget looking over my shoulder and seeing Ralph Macchio run up right behind me. I was, everybody was starstruck. Everybody that was there obviously had a little bit of starstruck going on, but ain't no time for that. These men and women are working, bro.
I
You
love
know
it.
what I mean? So I'm
Yeah.
gonna stay. I stayed in my lane. I stood next to Thomas Ian Griffith for like 3.5 hours one day on set.
And
I
who's
didn't
that?
say
Tell us who that is.
Thomas Ian Griffith. He plays Silver, Terry Silver in Cobra Kai.
Okay.
And I remember I recently shared on my social media, in fact, that I remember being like 7, 8, 9 years old, chilling with my grandfather, watching Thomas Ian Griffith on In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah.
Way, way, way back in the
And look,
day.
look how far you've come, brother. That's
And I'm
amazing.
standing right beside him, bro.
Yes, yes, yes. Dude, I love it. That's just epic. Hey, I was looking into the emotional safety relationship piece, and there's a recent study that stated that emotional safe relationships increase individual performance by 50%. How do you cultivate that culture backstage? What do you do?
Well, obviously, you try to find common ground, because everybody wants to talk about something, and usually it's about the lifestyle. Everything when you're on set, everything is film related. Everybody has jobs, everybody has family at home. Everybody has things that they have on their mind, and generally, that's what a lot of the conversation revolves around: is the husband, the wife, the family, the job at home, the aspirations for the next project, what have you. So you you get into that vibe with everybody else, and things just kind of organically, the discussions, the relations. Um, and again, having done the smaller roles, the background roles, I haven't got a lot of experience about working scenes with dialogue, with physicalities, that call on that.
For
You
sure.
see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Hey,
Um,
let me ask you this then, just kind of a caveat off of that question. How does that then carry over into your personal relationships? So you're building this, cultivating this culture backstage. How does that cultivate into your personal relationships?
uh, I don't know, man. It's just we're all actors. The world is our stage. So I'm very, I don't know, I'm closed caption, Michael. I don't have a big circle. I mean, I go to work, I come home, and I work towards my aspirations. And a lot of times that requires isolation,
It does.
and not all my friends are people of faith, if you will. So a lot of that is in isolation as well. When I'm alone, I'm able to meditate, I can pray, so it's like when I moved back here to Northwest Pennsylvania, I've set my sights on the Northeast market: Pittsburgh, Philly, Jersey, New York City. And when we're getting into like New York City, we're talking about Law and Order. We're talking about big roles. So right now, when I came back to Northwest Pennsylvania, I likened it as to if you take a seed and you put it in an envelope or a paper towel and you moisten it and you put it in a Ziploc, you put it up in the closet. You put it in a dark place, Michael. You put it where it can germinate.
Yep.
So it's like I don't have a lot of social relations, and I'm okay with that. I mean, mind you, I'm cordial and kind and polite. I like to do stuff. But right now, again, I feel like this is a time where I need to isolate. I just made a 1,100 mile return trip home after being gone 5 years. I touched back down in the same job. I basically picked up the torch where I left it, you know, and that comes with its own cross.
For sure.
Because I feel like I'm back to ground zero, which is good because that's sometimes where we can rebuild from again.
I want to talk a little bit about what you just said because, many in your creative industry kind of struggle with identity beyond the stage or even camera, right? Are there any moments where transition between roles have caused questioning of loss of yourself? Have you ever had like a role that you're like, man, I kind of goes against my faith, and how am I supposed to act this? Do you know what I mean? Have you ever
So
struggled with anything like that?
the film's called Obedience, Michael.
Talk to us on it.
Thank you, Darian McGee, everybody that's been involved with Obedience. We just took home actually took home an award at the Black Virginia Film Festival.
Oh wow.
The trailer, we took Best Trailer Award. I had a significant part in that trailer. My character was the general, and the general was a racist drug kingpin.
Wow.
Yeah, I understand that concept of losing myself to become a character.
Wow.
This character was he was the ringleader, so he called the shots, and he my character gave direct orders to his underlings to lace heroin with fentanyl and put it into black neighborhoods.
Wow.
So yeah, man, I was like, oh my God, I was scared of the role. I was scared of the role. I was like, I don't want to be portrayed as this kind of person. But I stopped, and I always consult with Annette. Okay, I spoke of Annette earlier, my mentor. Annette said, go for it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you serious? Do you see the controversial, how far out this role is? She's like, because my goal is to be a villain in film. My goal is to be that bad guy.
For
You know
sure.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So she's like, take the role. And I looked at actors like Billy Bob Thornton,
For sure.
like Edward Norton. You know, they took on these very controversial roles and they succeeded, man.
Yeah, and you know what's insane is I don't know, I'm very rookie-ish when it talks to that, but I know there are many big actors that are out there that have taken over those roles that you just talked about, but they like live their life through that entire time that they're because it's like a mindset thing, right? Don't you really got to kind of get in that character to really have the true like because when that camera starts rolling, they gotta like believe you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's the fun part about acting. You got to look like you're not acting, Michael. It's got to be believable.
for sure, for sure. Hey,
So yeah,
let's
on
yeah.
that note, one of the most challenging characters on another film I ever had, Revenge Protocol, Austin Rhodes, Prestigious Entertainment. Thank you. Big shout out. My character, my family just got kidnapped, Michael. And my scene partner's Bronson Taylor.
Wow.
He's like 2.5 times my size. My job as a character is to convince the audience that I'm blowing up on this guy. That
Wow.
I'm absolutely losing my cool. I'm his boss, you know, and I have to make that believable. Okay, so I have to jump up and act as hostile as possible.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point, Mike, you can't act, you got to be.
Right. Right.
So here I am, and I think we were on set for 5.5, 6 hours. every take had to start with that same intensity. That
Yeah.
I was
Hey,
exhausted.
dude, I can only imagine. I always think of this. I don't watch as much TV as I used to. Simply, I'll just tell my audience that I find like there's so much more in life that I could be working on and bettering myself, helping my clients, blah, blah, blah. But I do love going to movies to see movies in movie theaters. And occasionally I'll watch some stuff on Netflix. But I want to ask you this. How is it real when they cry? Like when these actors are crying, how do they get their mindset, Kris, to crying? How does that even work?
Well, I suppose it helps if you're sensitive to begin with. I've never had to cry on cue. I've never had to cry on film to this date. So I can't really get into that or
Yeah,
explain
you don't
how
know.
that
Yeah, because
works.
plus you're the villain. I mean, no one's gonna see a villain cry anyhow. But I see it. I'm like, gosh, they got to be taking some Visine before the cut or whatever. You know what I mean? To just make it look like they're crying. Because I'm like, how does
I'm
that
not
even work?
I'm not exactly sure how they do that. That's a great question, and now I'm going to ask around because I want to know.
Please,
But
because I'm
I
just
would
curious. Because
imagine.
I always wondered because I'm like, gosh, that's a tough emotion to just trigger. Like,
Imagine the places you got to go.
exactly.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? How intense you got to go. My
Hey,
hat's off.
I want to transition into this here, Kris. I help clients really navigate major transitions with clarity, right? And what steps did you personally take to rediscover purpose beyond a single role?
So what you're asking me is like the transition time between roles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the closest what from my experience, I had an opportunity where one week I had to audition for a German soldier,
Okay.
and the following week I had to audition for a Russian soldier.
Oh, wow.
Now, my accent, I didn't get the part on the Russian soldier. I did get the German soldier role, but I was already in the zone from being the German soldier, and it was a World War II German soldier. So I already had that mindset base. Obviously, I don't know. They liked the audition for the Russian soldier. Everything looked like we were moving ahead. I was going to get the role, and then all of a sudden, I didn't get the role. But it was tough. It was tough. And again, with not having a lot of roles that I'm invested in personally, if you will,
Yeah.
I don't feel I can answer the question fluidly like somebody that, because I understand what you're getting at, and
For
even
sure.
going there right now in my own mind, it's hard to fathom how you would go from this character
Yeah.
to the next one, and just like, what would you bring along,
For
what
sure.
would you leave behind,
Yeah.
so a lot of that I feel would come with more experience,
Okay. Okay.
you know uh, because again, a lot of my roles have been background, small roles, small dialogue supporting roles. So generally, it's a mind space.
For
You
sure.
know, a friend of mine on their bio, it says, "Give me the script and let me do the rest."
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
basically, a lot of it for me has been reading the stories, studying the script, and building the character around everything that's going on in that scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I recently had, well, not recently, probably a year ago, I had, I forgot her name from the American Gladiators on, the female American Gladiators, and she did that whole Netflix series. She was on there. She was I'm drawing a blank, and I forgot her name. But it's interesting. She would always tell me because she had roles and she was auditioning for stuff and roles like that. But she's like, you really got to get like in this mindset of like whatever it is, you're like over exaggerating, yelling, screaming, or whatever it is to prep for whatever your role is. Is that kind of like what you have to do as well?
Yeah, you definitely have to rehearse.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of times you'll get a script and 2 or 3 days later they want to read.
Oh,
They
wow.
want a cold read, and you better be able to read without the script in your hand.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot of validity to that.
For sure.
Even just doing auditions, I would carry note cards with me, Michael.
Okay.
I'd write my line, and on the flip side, I'd write the other person's line, and I'd put little notations of physicalities.
Like
Like,
emotions and how you should be acting. Okay.
exactly.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense.
And I'd find myself sitting outside, and I'd look over, I'm in Florida, and I'd see a lizard, and I'd beller out my line at that lizard. So yeah, there's absolutely a preparation.
Wow. That's insane.
Please. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't just show up not prepared. So yeah, there's a lot of the muscle to flex.
For
You know what
sure.
I'm saying?
Yeah. Hey, you had some major big pivots in your lifetime. And as we're getting close to wrapping up today, I want to kind of articulate this to, because, for those making big pivots, and you have had some big pivots in your lifetime, Kris, whether it could be parenting, moving cities, shifting careers. What would you say the top mindset and relational practices you would recommend for any of that?
Well, you know, my mother always told me I can do anything I set my mind to.
I tell my daughter that all the time, man.
And my God tells me to love my neighbor.
Amen.
So I feel if I navigate with the mindset that I can do anything I choose, then, within reason, I can give it a go. That doesn't mean I'm going to be successful, but it does mean that I gave it an honest attempt. And if I go into each opportunity and I love my neighbor, I can't lose, Michael.
Oh, you're preaching. I love it. That's a good way to say that. And I always say this, I always tell my clients, you can win and lose in life, but if you're losing in life, you're repeating the same thing. However, if you have the different perspective of winning and learning, your whole life changes perspective. You know? Um, as a coach and as a life coach, mindset coach, relationship specialist, I often talk about encouraging weekly check-ins around hope and fear. Those are two big things, right? How have you seen those conversations impact partner trust and alignment during any kind of change? Does that make sense?
As far as like intimate partner,
Well, anyway, you want to look at it from that perspective, or you can look at it as life in general, in your roles. Like, how have you seen those conversations impact maybe partner trust? Are you in a relationship right now? Okay. Have you
no,
been in
sir.
a relationship?
Not since I haven't been in a committed relationship since probably 2017.
Okay. So it's probably been some time. So it's probably a tough question for you to answer. I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back in what I said earlier about having the mindset I can do anything and loving I don't hit that on the target every time. You know what I'm saying?
Well, we're imperfect, brother. We're not perfect. We don't have a perfect life. Like, we can do our very best.
A lot of the things I had to unpack, one of those things was being a perfectionist. One of those things was having to be the best, you know. So that's why the faith thing helps me on the daily because it allows me to, and that's why I'm on social media a lot. I promote myself a lot and I struggle with that, Michael, because it's like this, I'm not trying to seek attention, but I'm trying to market myself. I worked in
Understand?
I worked in addiction treatment. You know, uh, I know part of the curriculum taught about how attention-seeking behavior is unhealthy. You know, and it's like I see all my people constantly like, oh, I got to take a break from. Yes, you got to take a break. You know,
I always say this. I always say You can either consume social media or you can provide the material. I'm on the latter. I don't know if you followed any of my stuff, but I do consume a little because I want to see what my competition is doing. I want to see what my industry is doing, and then maybe some casual stuff. But most of the time, I'm very aware of what I put into my head because I think that truly affects who we are. Um, hey,
Absolutely.
before we go today, how can, if someone stumbled on this podcast today or their first time or whatever it might be, they want to get a hold of you in some way, and maybe they're aspiring to be an actor, can you give everybody your credentials at this time and how they can get a hold of you, Kris?
Absolutely. You can find me on Facebook, Kris D Roberts. You can find me on Instagram, Kris D Roberts 1. Uh, email address is chrisdroberts1@gmail.com. You can find me on IMDb as Kris D Roberts. I'm on TikTok as Kris D Roberts. The name Kris D Roberts, I was on a film set, and I was trying to come up with a stage name. Okay. Long story short, the director put me into a role, and he says, he out of the blue one day, he looked over at me and he says, Kris D Roberts, and it stuck. That's why everything is Kris D Roberts. You know, when I'm filling other stuff out, it's not Kris D Roberts. But anyway, yeah, you can find me anywhere, Kris D Roberts on Google, and it's Kris with a K. I always like to say that too because Kris with a K. It just adds that punch, you know. Oh, that's Kris with a K.
Yeah, no, I love it. Hey, what's your next big project? Can you share, or are you working on something you want to tell our listeners?
Well, I've recently been talking to a commercial agent in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I'm working at getting my foot in the door to do national commercials.
Mm-hmm.
Currently setting up an appointment with a network or an agency photographer to get some fresh headshots for the portfolio, you know. And I sent an email this morning to NBC Casting. You know, I shoot for the moon, bro.
You
You
do.
know,
No, you know what you got to do? I'll tell you something better. Shoot for the stars. If you miss the stars, you fall on the moon.
that's my mindset every day, man. You
I
know,
love it.
and that goes back to that crazy vulnerability.
Yes, yes,
You know,
absolutely.
some days I don't know if I need an exorcist or a therapist, bro. But
Well,
I
you
believe
have faith. You're not going to need an exorcist, brother. When you're faith and with walking with Jesus Christ, you're not going to need that ever. Kris, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to exit us today. I'm going to call you as soon as we're done and just follow up with the details. So answer your phone as soon as we're done with the live. But Kris, it's been such an honor to have you on my podcast, to hear your beautiful journey. It is awe-inspiring. You truly provide value to the community, and especially to all of our listeners that I stream on 8 different continents. Before we go, I just again thank you so much, and I appreciate everything. Any words of encouragement to anybody out there that's listening? Go.
I want to thank anybody that's tuned in. I hope you find my story inspiring, encouraging. Keep your head up. You know, just keep plowing, keep planting, and keep plowing.
I love
You
it.
know what I mean? Love your
Absolutely.
neighbor.
I love it. And you heard it there from Kris. My name is Michael Hicks, host with the most of Framing New Heights. As always, 1% better in mind, body, and soul. Come on, Kris. Stay flexed. Yeah, oh, there it is. Yes, buddy. All right, awesome. I love it. I love it. Hey,